So I'm Amal Abuzeinab. I'm a senior lecturer at School of Art, Design and Architecture here at the Montfort University. And I'm really thanking Sung for the invitation because, again, I think as one of the presenter earlier, this is almost my first, let's say, I don't know how to call it, but yeah, conference in person since the pandemic. And what I'll be talking about my research journey into different research topics, and then hopefully yet one theme, and we'll see how that plays out. And what I'm focusing on my presentation is really around the kind of like the journey, what kind of really worked well, things that has helped around the time, rather than going in details about what research that I'm doing. So for the presentation, what I'll be talking, kind of like, let's say, the official start of the journey. I think we all start in different times, but there is always kind of some moment when it becomes official. And then, as I said, what worked well during the journey, any kind of like lessons and things that has helped during that time. And then I will end up with kind of what is really my focus, hopefully, in the next 2 to 3 years in terms of research and in terms of the development opportunities. Officially started as kind of like a PhD research between 2011 2015. That was an EPSRC PhD funded project. And the thesis title was Implementing Green Business Models in the UK Construction Industry, Opportunities and Challenges. So when I started doing that research in 2011, 2015, the business model thinking, green business models, and so on and so forth, was very much into the management research. And what I have tried to do during the PhD is almost adapting and making sense of what this actually means within construction industry. And then I put 2016, this is where kind of like my first lectureship position starts. And I think almost transitioning from a PhD student to an academic, I think that was a big transition, because a PhD is most of the time, hopefully the PhD students who here would agree, is almost one thing. You are focusing really on one thing, even if you are doing different other things, but it's still just one thing. But then I think when I started as academic, I felt I'm doing so many different things, and they need kind of like different transitions and different ways of actually working, and was really huge learning curve. And still, I think I'm learning. I'm definitely not there to almost to say, okay, yes, now I know how to manage my workload and things like that. But I think it's almost like I would like to get a little bit back and think about really what kind of drove those different topics, and even when kind of like looking at research, what was driven kind of like for me. And I think definitely on top is always that the kind of like the curiosity around maybe a specific topic or a specific question. That was something that is always there. Some projects were really driven by collaboration in a way. There was someone bringing an idea, and maybe there is something that I could contribute to. And then I would say again, creativity, because I think that's kind of like very embedded into any research. What we do, maybe sometimes you try to solve real life problems, or maybe you have kind of like a theoretical understanding, or having that advancement, or whatever we do. So there is definitely an element there. And here is almost giving an overview of the different, let's say, research topics. And I said it might be easier when we have kind of some selected publications around this, so it gives an idea. So when I look at, for example, the green business model, that was very much kind of the PhD research. And this is where I kind of like tried to see, okay, after I have finished my PhD, can I actually recruit a PhD student to extend the work? Because there are kind of like a big gap at that time when I kind of completed my PhD in 2015. And I have a PhD student, Kay, who was supposed to be here. She's here somewhere. So Kay just completed or had her Viva end of May this year. So this is kind of like a really big milestone. But what we have been working on here, so I started with green business model, and then when Kay started her PhD research in 2017 or 18, I think, it became really clear on the literature. Now we are kind of like really moving towards more of sustainable business models, and almost can we look at it from kind of like really broadly? Because with green business model was mainly to do with kind of like the environmental practices within the construction industry. But then we moved on to kind of really towards more of, can we look at it from that, let's say from the social, from the economic and the environmental aspect as well. And then moving on a little bit on some of the collaborative projects that I have worked with. And I highlighted almost where I see the kind of like the different topics are coming from. For example, the one with the bottle house, the transdisciplinary research, that was mainly to do actually with how we work when we are coming from different disciplines, when we have a specific problem we are trying to solve, when we have an industry partner. It was a very small project, case study, to be able to see how that will work in practice. And then the sustainable development implementation, was very much driven by collaboration from in South Africa. And what we were trying to do, although the kind of like the case study very much focused on South Africa, now we are moving towards, let's understand sustainable development implementation in higher education, how this is kind of like done, what are the good practices are there, and what are the lessons that we can actually take from there. And more recently, which is around the kind of like the global upcycling, and this is something driven or kind of like led by Sung. And the contribution here, again, this is very much a collaborative thing. It started with the idea is, okay, Sung is kind of like really looking at global upcycling and upcycling practices. And then what I'm trying to contribute here is almost using a method, which is a qualitative method, interpretive structural modeling. And we try to see what are the kind of factors that affect global upcycling, and can we do some structure to them so that we would give, let's say, the audience or the participants something that, okay, these are, for example, let's say these are the success factors. Are there kind of like drivers, success factors that drive the others? Or if there is challenges, can we actually identify the root challenges? Then we start to solve them, and then we move forward. And I think if I kind of like really briefly reflected on some of the things that really kind of like helped around those things, I think they start always with almost something that I'm already having, I'm almost working on. The example, for example, with the PhD student is, I have seen there is a potential of this topic. What can we do with that one? Can we take it forward? What would be the best way? What is available to me? And at that time, the thing that was available to me is kind of to have a PhD student who would able to be working on that. And again, this is very much related to the, for example, what type of any training, any support that was available at that time that I could actually take on. And I think one of the really important things that helped around the way is the idea of multiple mentors. I think most of the time we think, okay, I have one mentor and that's it. But I believe, or my thinking is that mentors are actually, you can approach them as kind of like a task, let's say specific. If someone would be able to help on a specific thing or a specific question, I would reach out to them, and those I consider them is still mentors in that situation. And also the collaboration projects, it's all started with some curious conversation. It never intended to actually have something in common or working in common, but it was literally, okay, what you do, what type of research you kind of conducting, what methods you are using. If we use this method, what we can get out of it, and so on and so forth. And also, again, a space like this where you kind of actually step a little bit back and try to reflect, although it's really hard in practice to almost to kind of step back and reflect. But I think it's really great way if we can build that more often. And another example of almost like looking at some of the available resources or something that it kind of, again, helped around the way. So I remember during my PhD studies, there was this workshop about building a research profile. And at that time I was just starting. So it was really giving advice around what research profile will look like, what are the main things that we need to consider. And another important workshop that has impacted the way I think in terms of let's say, of the development and working as an academic. It was an early career research workshop in Brazil, although it was a specific topic, but then there was kind of an element of actually development and training and sharing experience and giving kind of like best practices and best advices around those. So I think those have really kind of informed, let's say, my think, and it become something that I really rely on whenever there is kind of like a specific training course or a specific development opportunity around how to do things, how to navigate your way, what are the best practices and things like that. I usually tap into it, and I think it's great help. So for me, the kind of, let's say, the projects that I'm trying to work on in the next, I have kind of like started a few things here and there, but this is what I'll be focusing on. So the first one is adapting sustainable business model patterns to the built environment. So the current research, we do have, actually, there is a research done around sustainable business model patterns, and this is something covering like really big arena of industries and kind of like a big thinking, and it's got both primary and secondary research with it. But what we're trying to do with this collaborative project is almost try to see, okay, can we adapt this to the built environment, what it means in terms of, let's say, our discipline in that way, or taking built environment as kind of like a case study of trying to understand what it means. And the other kind of something coming in the line is around sustainable development implementation. So I had a little bit of informal conversations with the sustainability manager here at DMU. And through them, I found there is actually what we call it the Environmental Association of Universities and Colleges. So what we thought they would be really good kind of, again, almost a platform to actually see how this works, because those people have already got some, let's say, self-identified thing that they are already doing something. And this is what we try to focus on. And then again, the collaborative project with Sung, which will start, already started, start next month. Yeah, the International Upcycling Research Network. So I think when I was trying to see, okay, what actually the kind of the common theme between those one. And I have been thinking is really what I have been researching and looking at is around the sustainability transformation. And I think I very much relate to what Dr. Patterson earlier has shared, the idea of let's work with that transformation and adoption. Let's see who are the kind of like the one already doing things. Let's study that and have kind of like a really better understanding of it. And then maybe we can move forward with things. And rather than looking at sustainability transformation as almost, let's just focus on a product or service, but it's much bigger than that, is wider. Can we think about the whole kind of system change, or can we use the business model as kind of like a tool to actually help us understand and unpack, let's say, some of those good practices that are happening, and then we can share them widely. And this is almost like reflecting again on what are the practices, what are the things that could help. I think one of the useful thing I found so far is the idea of continuous adjustment. So there is almost every time looking at what I'm doing at the moment, what type of things that can be working on, how I can actually maybe align things and things like that. So hopefully I'm in the on time. And then there is something that I think one of the most, let's say, articles about kind of like the mental energy, I think it started at Harvard Business Review, and they were talking about much more about rather than time management and things like that, we're talking about kind of energy management and how we manage our energy and what is our best time to do kind of like focused work and so on and so forth. Another thing that I started to do, just again to reflect on my own working practice, is what it's called an EPS recording. And if I remember well, so E stands for effort, P progress, and S for success. And the idea is we look at kind of, again, our projects, our things, not just from a success point of view, but sometimes we might just do an effort on something to understand or to learn. sometimes we might actually have done a little bit of progress, but it's not success yet, but at least it's a progress. And that it kind of like gives a little bit of wider view of looking at everything that we do. So I think just before concluding, because it's a very sharing platform. So those are some of the podcasts I usually listen when I'm trying to figure out something. And I found them quite useful. The Changing Academic Life, I think it gave me a broader overview of the reality of academic work, and still some people actually can make it work in a way. A Squiggly Career, I like that one. It's very practical, very short. It gives some of the practices that help. And then the 10% happier, this is very much is, I think the guests they bring, they look at happiness from a science perspective. So it's not just literally something kind of like not driven by evidence or something like that. And I'll just leave you with this, almost like an email exchange between some of the people I consider them really a strong mentor to me. And I remember I was just saying, I was explaining to them what was the kind of like the thing that I really noticed with them. And I say, you share your curiosity with great generosity. I try to model that as much as possible. It's not easy. And the response was saying that sharing ideas amongst ourselves and then with the students should be core to our work. So hopefully we can take that forward. And I think I'll stop here.